Welcome back to our Grown Experiment. We're here with Tara from La Belle Vie Farm. So Tara, can you tell us about yourself and your farm?
Sure. We are a farm located in St. Charles, and our primary crop is haskap berries. They are a fruit native to the boreal regions of the world, and they taste like a blueberry and a raspberry had a baby. And we love them very much. We've got about 10 acres under cultivation. Our farming business, it's our family that runs the farm. It's been in my husband's family well, the children are the fourth generation here. So we're third generation here. And we also have up until pretty recently, we were both working off the farm full-time in government jobs. And my husband continues to work in the municipality here. And we have a small market garden and a commercial kitchen. And we have a R40 insulated freight container attached to our commercial kitchen that we're converting into an aquaponics grow chamber so that it can be efficiently operated and powered by fish year round. We have a bunch of different things going on, I guess.
Yeah, that's cool. I remember when we first tried to do this interview the first time, when we had some sort of mishap there with the connections and stuff, we started getting in a little bit to the aquaponics there. So would you be able to get into the aquaponics? Because that's a really cool system. It's got a lot of kind of complexity to it, but it's got a cool kind of functionality to it. So could you get into that, please?
Sure. So really simply, basically we have there are three components. There's fish, and then a biofilter, and then a plant system, if you want to break it down really into basics. And we have tanks where so this is all brand new to us. We are not experts in this at all, but we're in the kind of like launching phase. So we're doing some intensive research and spending time with people right now and having conversations. And I get to go and visit 2 growers in Muskoka at the end of this month that I'm really excited about. And then we'll put the knowledge that we've been acquiring into action. So there will be fish tanks, and then in the freight container, we have what looks like a hydroponic system set up. It's the same principles. It's just run with fish poop instead of mainstream nutrients.
Okay. And so I guess the idea is that the fish, the tank that they're swimming in, when they're getting fed. So what would you feed them for, I guess, for starters?
Well, we're going to be buying to begin, because we have to kind of put it all together. So we can't pick all of our battles at the same time. So we have, we'll be buying commercial fish food to put in with the intention of growing as much of our own fish food as possible as we go on. So there's some plants like duckweed that we can put into the system that we can grow for the fish. But yeah, at this point, just commercial fish food till we get it working well.
Okay, and duckweed, is that something like you grow in the tank with the fish, or is that like?
So we can grow things in a number of different ways because it's a water garden. So if you think of it as being like an aquatic garden, and we're moving things around as we need to like manage growth stages or like size and maturity of the plant. So it could be like we'll have it they could eat it in the tank, and then we would have we have to figure all these pieces out, but we'll have different areas where we can grow different things, and including different fish tanks. But it's still being very much figured out. Right now we have it running as a smaller traditional hydroponic system, just to get the plumbing pieces in the freight container worked out, and to make sure that everything's functioning properly before we start like messing with like animals, right? So
Yeah, exactly. And so how have you found the hydroponics so far? How do you like it?
Denis is the one who is best with like managing that, but we like it. We've been feeding ourselves lettuce in the winter for like 3 years now, I guess, and sharing with other people. We also were growing like microgreens throughout the winter, so we're going to shift those over to hydroponic as well. But so far, it's it's fine. Like, you have to think about the different factors that there's so many things about the hydroponic system that's similar to that's the same as aquaponics, so it's all good, like temperature control and airflow and lighting and humidity levels and things like that. So yeah, we're getting there a little bit at a time. We're a bit behind schedule as per usual. We often take we've been together for 11 years, and we'll take 5 years to make a decision on things on a regular basis. Like, we have a continuous 5-year plan that's constantly evolving.
Yeah, well, it's like you got to get the plan kind of right. It's like especially when you're dealing with a big plan like that, like when you're getting into the aquaponic system, like as you're sort of starting to lay the things out, and even as I ask more questions, right, like that's another sort of variable. And I can see when you're in that sort of stage of developing the idea, right? You're like, well, I mean, yeah, that's a thing we're considering, but we're also kind of you're also considering so many other things right now, right? Where it's like we know for sure we're gonna have fish, we know for sure we're gonna get nutrients from the fish, but how we're gonna supply all that kind of now, we need to do this thing first, and after we get this thing down, then we can add this thing, and once we get that down, we can kind of.
Yeah, and so we're a little bit more traditional. We can go down, Denise better than me at sort of going onto YouTube University and figuring things out. And I'm a little bit more traditional with my learning. So there's courses available through Lethbridge College that you can take, a college online course, which is working really well for me because it gives me lots of things to read and make notes on, and I have to learn that way. So it's good.
Yeah, as much at learning you could do, right?
Yeah. Poke away at these things in little, sometimes it's little increments forever, and then all of a sudden it's a giant leap forward, right? So the Haskap orchard was a 10-year plan right off the bat. He should be here with me and do these things with me. But anyway, we got together and we got pregnant, and we were waiting for the baby to be born, and we hatched the idea of the orchard. And then when I was on my maternity leave, we wrote the business plan, and we aren't married, but our commitment to each other was to enter into, at that point, it was a 7-year business plan, but we saw no revenue for those 7 years. Where it was just investment, because it was a perennial orchard, right? And we knew it was going to take 5 to 6 years for them to come to maturity, and that we were probably going to have setbacks and all of those things. And yeah, here we are. It is working. So.
Well, yeah, exactly. And actually, you answered a question in there I was kind of thinking about as you were going along there. So it's about 5 to 7 years for a Haskap to mature.
Yeah. I mean, it's when you're growing anything, there's so many factors, and people will tell you all kinds of things, right? The propagators they tend to either they have really amazing conditions, and they do typically, and they get better yields than everybody else right off the bat. But yields are often over exaggerated when you're looking at varietal selection or plant selection. And years to maturity can vary. You can have things that stunt your plants. And we have one field where there's a low area that we had a bad flood in one year, and we fixed the drainage, but we've had stunted plants, and those stunted plants are still we just haven't got around to amending for them, but they're still stunted, and that's okay. But yeah. Rambling away.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's like that thing where, I mean, that's kind of part of being a farmer, right? Where you got this kind of thing where you get a flood like that. There's nothing you can really do about that. So I mean, yeah, it's not ideal, but generally speaking, I guess that's roughly amount of the time. And I mean, yeah, especially too when you talk to people oh, how much did you grow this year? It's well, if your money is in making food, it's oh, I probably grew this much, or maybe a little more than that. I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell. I mean, when you think about when you're growing food too, you drop a couple here, a couple are bad there, or whatever it is. So how much did you really grow? How much went to market? All that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, and you try to put things back into the cycle as much as possible, but there's always you can call it waste, or you would call it waste, and then but you can do something with the waste, you can compost it or whatever. But yeah, waste for sure. I'm tired today.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it sounds like you guys got to be really busy out there with all the plans you guys got on the go now, plus what you're doing already. So, like, what do you guys got on the go right now? Like, you guys are probably getting really geared up for your season, or you guys have some other stuff on the go right now?
I just planted the greenhouse yesterday, which was great and felt so good to do. I've been really behind on that this year because I had been committed to other things outside of the farm, which kind of set us on a whole other course for this year, but that's okay. So yeah, yesterday I planted the greenhouse with beets and carrots and lettuce and onions and peas. And all the perennials are starting to come back up in the greenhouse, which is kind of exciting. Like all the medicines are back up, and the perennial medicines and like the onions and the garlic, all the alliums are popping back up. So nice in there.
How big is in your greenhouse?
It's almost 1,500 square feet. It's
Oh,
big.
wow, that's a large greenhouse. Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. Like I like that too. Like we have a greenhouse too, and it's really cool. Like it's a nice thing to be able to have that greenery kind of early on when you're still
Mm-hmm.
kind of in winter, especially on a day like today where you get like a blizzard, right? Like freezing rain covers everything in a sheet of ice, and then you got your greenhouse. You go in there and you got these happy little seedlings, and then we got our a bunch of small plants there inside under lights that are getting ready to go into the greenhouse. Because I figure in a couple of weeks it'll be warm enough there in the mornings where the seedlings can stay out there, and then we don't have to worry about light no more because they'll have all the light they need all day long. And then once they get a little bit bigger, we'll up pot them one more time probably, and then after that they'll go in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we overplanted. We had a couple of seedlings that are kind of a little bit stragglers, but we got a lot of pretty good strong plants too.
Mm-hmm.
So no, we're looking forward to this year. Like we feel like this year we actually got a pretty good plan this year. I think we'll do well this year, providing no setbacks. But I
Always.
think those things happen. So
It's hard to now because like with the springs we've been having, there's so much fluctuation in temperature. So like when you said in a few weeks that you could put things out, I was thinking about it, and I just pulled out a little space heater for ours because I think I'm going to start putting in. We have like an area inside the greenhouse that we've closed off with some vapor barrier, and there's lights in there, and yeah, I think I'll just bring a little heater in and keep it above 2 degrees, 2 to 6 degrees right now. So just sort of keep it above that 2 degree, 2 to 4 degree mark. And with the daytime temperatures, like it's so hot in there. It's nice.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
yeah,
been inconsistent again.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Same with us. Like when we get like really nice warm days, it'll get up to like 30 in the dome, no problem. But like on those days where you get kind of like overcast, which this time of year it seems like we get tons of, we get lots of overcast and kind of like rain, and if not rain, you'll get snow, and like you said, it's weird weather, right?
Yeah.
And when you get that, because the our greenhouse is like the whole principle basically is it just stores as much heat as possible in like the soil, and we have a water heat sink in there,
Yeah.
and basically it just stores as much heat as possible in that, and that keeps overnight so that your seedlings don't die or freeze overnight, right?
Nice.
So yeah, that's why I figure like in a couple of weeks, hopefully we can get the more sensitive stuff out there because like you were saying with that small area that you're sectioning off for the little more sensitive stuff, as long as you keep it above a few degrees, you're probably all right, right?
Yeah, like I was looking at the 14-day this morning, and there was a break that I thought that. Yeah, like I'm good as of Sunday. And then if it gets too cold, I have backup heat, right? And like
Mm-hmm.
everything,
Yeah.
there's heat sink in there too. So yeah, I think we're good to have the cold hardy stuff out.
I think so, yeah.
It's coming up,
We've had
and
Yeah, we've had it in there for over a month now, and they seem to be doing well with that. And we don't add any heat; it's just the passive heat, and that seems to be fine for them.
we've got a boiler system on the property. So we have this wood boiler that goes to our house. It heats our house, and it heats our shop, and it heats our greenhouse. It's pretty awesome, and
Mm-hmm.
so we can we can get some heat into there too. It's like a big hot water circulating system.
And apart from the greenhouse, what do you have for a garden?
There's gardens. So in front of the greenhouse, there's a pretty big garden there that last year I had like cabbage and more calendula and rhubarb in. And then there's other beds on the other side of the greenhouse with different perennial herbs and flowers. And then in the front, there's another garden in the front. And inside we're doing microgreens right now too in the shop. So in the summertime, we have a couple of employees that help us in the summertime. And then we just poke away. And I think like right now I'm off work, so I'm home full time. And during the pandemic, I was off for the pandemic with the kids. So we just kind of puttered around, and that's what we did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean that's what you got to do. You got to kind of keep busy and keep going with what you got on the go. So I mean, you guys mostly focus on the Haas caps, and
Yeah.
you said you got your kitchen that's where you were planning on attaching your aquaponics system to there. So what do you do in your kitchen there? And when you, because I'm assuming this is probably a good sized kitchen. Uh, what were the virtues of getting into that? Like that must have been like a big investment. So I imagine that's something you use lots.
Yeah, so Denise and I, because we're public sector employees, and we both ended up in jobs in the public sector where we learned about grants and grant programs. So the two of us, between us, we've written more than like 100 successful grant applications for like our community and some for our business. So we take the approach that we think we've got some really great ideas and we can build a solid business plan around it. And so if the government is giving money towards these things, then that would be great if we could get some of it. So they funded we had a 50% grant for the shop building and the initial startup of the orchard, which was great. In the kitchen, the shop building is a processing facility and an inspected kitchen. And so in there we do, we make jam and fruit leathers, and we do juicing and Haskap ice cream. And then we make a variety of other products from time to time to there. And so with the grant funding, we always had this idea, like this understanding that if we were applying for grants, it was also to strengthen our community. So we've always, and I'm a teacher by training. And so, and Denis just is like, the man has been committed to his community his entire life. Like it's just who he is. It's just the fabric of Denis. So we built things with the idea that we could be a community demonstration facility and that people could have workshops there, and that we could support other people in their businesses or offer a community gathering place of some kind. So, so we've been, and it's like, it's all coming together, which is just this wonderful thing. So it was like we transformed through the pandemic. We're still in the transformation process, but we really did. So
Has most of the changes that's happened on your farm happened within the last 2-3 years?
well, it's been like the realization of that 10-year plan. So we started in 2012,
Right.
and it was like we are just the kind of people that, especially when we have light, we're outside from the time we get home until it's bedtime, really, like as much as we can be. So we just poked away at it, and it was what both of us feel that it's kind of like what we were born to do, really. And it's just a deep, meaningful thing for us to feel that, like, just the connection to the land. And like Denise's family's been here for a long time, and yeah. And
And I imagine. Go ahead. Sorry.
So it's interesting. Like he's so deeply rooted here, and like we have family in the region, but my family hasn't stayed in one place for longer than a generation, for as far back as we can trace on like all sides. And then he's just this like deeply rooted person here, which is kind of neat. It's wonderful.
Yeah, there's a little like a sort of a similar thing in a way in my family where like my mom and her family has kind of been in the area where they've been for a while now. And my dad, he kind of like moved way away from where he's from to meet my mom and settle down where he's at. So he's from Newfoundland and he ended up in northwestern Ontario where he met my mother, and that's where I come from. And then I moved away from there to Sudbury because I met Sophia, and now I'm here. And then
And I'm deeply rooted here.
yeah,
Since
and you're not going to leave here. And then so now we'll see where Jorginho ends up if he goes anywhere, or maybe he'll stay here. That'd be hard for you then if he takes off, but it's in the family to go somewhere else.
Yeah, my parents aren't from here, so
That's true too. But you find a new home, right? Like I mean, you know, when you're and it's like sometimes you need that deep rooting is also like an anchor, right? Because like for me too, like with Sophia and her family, like it's been such a good thing. It's such a like it's good to be a part of that rooted tradition, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we just iterated the farm into our version of what we wanted it to be. So it was like this conversation when Amica was a baby about, well, like how much land do we want to use? And we couldn't come up with anything where we were like actively cultivating anything more than 40 acres. And yeah, so this is what we chose.
Yeah, and that's a consideration too when you want to think about like what you want to be doing when you think about like land size and stuff like that. Like some people think like, oh, I want to have like the biggest farm in the world. It's like, no, like, you know, for what I want to be able to do, if I want to be able to do something at a high level, like, you know, what can I realistically consider doing? So like when you guys were thinking about say 40 acres, why was that like a number you settled on?
Because we kept coming back to this piece about we didn't want to be like, for a number of reasons, like for regenerative agriculture reasons, but also just for like the labor of it. We didn't want to be tilling up the carbon and everything else. We didn't want to be tilling up the land all the time. So we knew we wanted to get into like a more perennial crop. And so we started looking at like specialty. There's a website on the OMAFRA website. There's a website called Specialty Crop Opportunities, and so we started looking at that website a lot. And Denis had already kind of been exposed to Haskap, and we settled on Haskap because it's nutrient dense. Like it has more antioxidants than wild or cultivated blueberries, and it's really good for you. And it's a northern native fruit, and it just kind of we settled on that. So that's how we developed. And then that was like, we didn't want more than 15 acres of that. And so then we have the homestead area. So it's a lot of kind of permaculture principles where like the most intensive things happen like closest to your home. And then you kind of get into field crops further away. Yeah. Do you want to ask me anything more about that planning process? I feel like I kind of jumped around a bit.
What's that? Sorry?
Did you want to ask? Can you hear me okay? Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
Soften off and ramble.
No, that's fine.
Did you want to ask me anything more about like that thinking process around the planning in the beginning?
Yeah, sure. If you want to get into that more, for sure. I'd love to hear that.
Okay. Well, can you, what would you like to know more about in terms of that? Like the,
Oh, okay. So I'm thinking I remember in what you're probably alluding to, like when we were talking first before. So like when you were first talking about the aquaponics system, the real fascinating part that I had about it was a kind of complex sort of high functioning system where perfectly ideally you have it where all the inputs are out and outputs are sort of taken care of, where you feed the fish basically something that you're growing a part of the system, which they turn into fertilizer, which feeds the system, which then you take from and then can take some kind of excess from either that system or another system to put back into there. So I was kind of thinking like I liked how that sort of worked out, and then I think I was liking the idea of thinking about these sort of high level integrated systems because they're also like the sort of permaculture sort of system, and how you mentioned that when you guys are farming, the way that you're trying to do that is you want to be as sort of integrative as possible with existing systems.
Right. So it's this like ecosystem thinking approach. And like so with the closed what excites me about what excited me, for example, about bees, when we got it, we had bees for a few years, and then we had 2 years of losses, and I am not ready to get back into that because I don't have the time. So but when we got into bees, what was really interesting to me about bees was the whole idea of the colony, and not like the individual, but like taking care of the colony of things there, and just the hive and all of the things about sitting at the hive. And it's the same thing with the aquaponics system, in that it's not just an individual, it's a system. It's a closed loop system. And it should achieve stasis, right? Like it should achieve some degree of balance where the inputs into it become very minimal, and it just takes care of itself once we really learn it and understand it. But it's that like ecological thinking of how all of the pieces fit together as a whole piece. That we've both always been drawn to. And so like when we look at, like, Deneen understands this land because he's lived here since he was 6 years old. He's been cutting hay since he was 6 years old here. And sorry, he's lived here his whole life, but he's been cutting hay since he was 6 years old. And so he knows every corner of every field. Like he knows the drainage, and he spent so much time just observing and acquiring the scientific knowledge of this place, right? And I think that's what drives both of us, is just this fascination with how all the pieces come together.
Well, even when applying permaculture principles, I think the biggest first step is just observing and knowing what's going on. And it sounds like Denis already has that.
Yeah.
So that really brought you guys forward to then think, okay, how can we implement different things? Because we know how the land works, we know uh, what goes where. So I think that probably helped a lot.
Mm-hmm. And I think it'll be the same with like the aquaponics system, where like Denis is going to be more inclined to managing he'll manage the fish and the technical components, and it's like the plant side of things is kind of more where I sit. Like that's what I do. And we get to put it together. Like we get to put both of our brains together on this project in a way that we haven't really worked together that intensively before. And it's really exciting, and it's going well. So we're looking forward to that. And then we should be churning out, once things are up and operational, we'll probably have some setbacks before we get to these numbers, but we should be churning out like 400 head of lettuce or herb bunches a week, which is nice. Like it's not a huge amount, but it's enough to supply our local grocery store and our clients that come to the gate, and go down to the market in the Wellville, and maybe some restaurants, right? We'll see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Is that where your produce goes? Does it go to the grocery store at this point, or is it more markets?
It's mostly direct, like it's mostly markets in the summertime, but we have a lot of people who come and pick up stuff here at the farm as well. Like our farm gate, we've had a self-serve farm stand for, this will be our 3rd year. And then we have a U-pick operation, so people come to the farm to pick too. So it's always been about bringing community to the farm for us. So those pieces are building, and it's not like anything's really big. It's just like we have these different like small components that we put together.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, it sounds like almost like when you talk about your homestead, it's like a puzzle. It seems like there's this piece and that piece, and it seems like you said with the 10-year plan, it seems like right now it's like coming together, but there's still pieces missing and still pieces that need to move around.
And we definitely can't add anything more at this point. So yeah.
Well, that's kind of good too to be at that.
We're going to need a gate at the end of the driveway, just to be like, okay, world, we need to turn you away right now. So
Yeah. Well, hey, boundaries are a thing, and they're good thing, right?
mm-hmm.
It's yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that's a whole other thing.
I was curious if you had any tips on your hasket bushes, because we have a couple in our yard. Do you have any tips on what you do when the snow leaves?
Sure. So where are they in your yard right now? Are they in partial shade, or what kind of light do they get?
Partial shade, because they're behind a big tree.
Okay. Ours in partial shade do pretty well. So both in morning shade and in afternoon shade, they seem to grow really better in partial shade. So that's a good thing. How old are your bushes?
We just planted them last year.
Okay, and how big are they?
A little less than 2 feet, probably.
Okay, so I wouldn't bother pruning them for a couple more years. Just let them do their thing. And then you can do some selective pruning, taking out, it depends on the bush, but taking out, like you would prune any other bush, just taking out stuff that you don't want in there, the dead, the damaged, the diseased. Haskap doesn't really we haven't noticed any disease really at all. And they like to be fed. So, I mean, they thrive in a lot of different soil types. We are predominantly clay here. I've heard that they don't do particularly well in sandy soil. They like to receive amendment. I don't know what you guys use for amending in your garden. Do you use like kelp or manure or?
So we just have been putting compost on top, basically.
Perfect.
And we also have Meeker's Mix.
Yeah, so then
fish
yeah,
fertilizer.
we did use fish fertilizer last year too for some of our plants, and then for the garden a bit more widely. We fed so the Haskaps we planted early in the season, right? Or did we plant them later? We planted them.
They were the earlier,
right?
The
so
earlier stuff.
they we fed with the Meeker's Mix too. We planted them on top of some Meeker's Mix, and then with a little bit of compost from the dump, and then with soil. Yeah, because we had the compost bag too. And then I fed them with a little bit of that. It wasn't Meeker's, that fish stuff. I'm thinking of a fish fertilizer we have.
Oh.
Yeah, no, the Meeker's we put in the holes with it.
Yes.
And then I fed it with fertilizer maybe once or twice.
Oh, okay.
And that was last. They're good. You probably don't need to touch them for this year by the sounds of it. And yeah, they'll be happy. When you're planting Haskap, you just want to make sure you pack around the roots and that there aren't any like air pockets around the roots. That's just a general good sort of planting principle. It's a bit trickier sometimes with bushes if you're planting a bush, but pack it good and tight. And they're a hardy little bush. They are easy to grow, which is another reason why we chose them.
Okay, is that, and you said it takes about 5 to 7 years for fruit to start or for it to be in full swing?
So we started, and you guys are starting with like 2 or 3 year old plants by the sounds of it. And we started with they looked like my pinky finger, little sticks going into the ground. Yeah. So
Okay.
if you planted them last year and you didn't get any fruit, you will have fruit from them this year. You need 2 different varieties, though. That's the only trick with them, is you need 2 different varieties to get good pollination. There's some
we do, yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Do you know what varieties you have?
Oh, darn.
No.
We bought them from Phil at Beautiful Field Farm, but I can't remember the name.
I don't remember.
Yeah, no, I can't remember. But I remember him telling us, though, that
Borealis was one.
Borealis might have been one of them, yeah.
And Aurora?
That came to me, but...
Anyway, there's lots of different flavors.
Maybe.
So we love our Aurora bushes. And then in the back, we have some newer varieties back there that we really like, too. And there is, I guess, one of the things that's interesting about Haskap is, so across, depending on the conditions that they're grown in, but more specifically across the varieties that there are, there's a huge flavor profile differences. So we have some bushes in the spring that are earliest bushes that ripen, and because we have 9 different varieties on the farm, and because there's 9 different varieties, our growing season is longer than a lot of other growers in the area. So we actually start picking mid to late June, and our season extends into the middle of August. So the early season varieties, they're delicious, but they're more tart, and we recommend them for people who like to do processing with Haskap. And then as the season progresses, for the most part, the varieties get sweeter. So our main season variety is called Aurora, and it's super delicious. And then our late season variety are the last ones we planted, and they're just coming into production now. And they're like twice the size of the other ones, and they are so good as well. And that's just, at the University of Saskatchewan, they have a fruit breeding program there, and so they've been collecting varietals from like Japan and Russia and Canada in the wilds and from people's orchards and breeding, and they've come up with some really beautiful varieties and keep getting better.
And you do different products with your Haskaps, correct?
We do. So we've got we have a commercial dehydrator, so we do fruit leathers, and then we make ice cream in like a small scale ice cream maker, hoping to kind of I think I've justified being able to scale that up once we have the cash to do it. And then we can juice and jam and jelly. Those are the primary ones. Sometimes we'll do a little bit of baking or.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of excited to try out our Haskaps when we start getting them because I've had them before and like I kind of like the idea that they're a natural berry, like you said too, and like we've got a bunch of different fruits that we're trying to grow on the property, and so like I don't know, I look forward to that. Like that's it's cool to like like the thing is when you plant fruit bushes, right? Like you always wish you kind of planted them 3 years ago. So we planted them 3 years ago. We'd be enjoying some fruit this year.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, it's like, oh, I guess just excited. You know, it's like you got to be patient though because, you know, you just got to wait. They gotta get older.
Yeah, I think that would be like one tip for sure. If like not like we're both of us, all of us are sort of well in our way of like homesteading, but I think if people started with the perennials that they wanted first, like you'd be that much closer to where you want to be sooner. But people often don't start with the perennials; they'll just plant whatever they can get in the ground.
Yeah, and usually you're like, oh, maybe this year and that year, but last year we planted 29 fruit bushes and trees, and we just got it all over with because the sooner they're in the ground, the sooner we can benefit from it, right? So we just took the plunge and we just put it all.
My mom tells this story of when she was a young girl and her grandfather, who I called Nono because I knew him too, he had a stone fruit tree in his yard in London. And then he had grafted like all of, it was maybe a plum tree or something. And he had grafted all of these other fruits onto the tree. I feel like that would be so much fun to do.
Yeah, no, I've seen that done before. Her father's got one of those. I don't know if it's produced anything yet. He didn't at first though. He didn't have another tree there to fertilize it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had like he had one of each of a few different kinds of trees, so he didn't have anything there to fertilize it. And I think the bugs kind of got at it there the one year, and it was having a hard time. But then he's got another apple tree in there now, or he got another couple.
No, he got one more apple tree, and then this year we had we planted apple trees the year before in the fall, or did we plant them early last year?
We planted them early last
year, and then we already got apples from them, so that was fun.
Yeah, we got 4 apples. 5?
4 in one and 3 in the other, so 7.
It's 7. Oh, that's not bad. And yeah, and they were great. They were good size too.
So satisfying.
I didn't get to taste them because there's in Portugal there's a thing where the first year the women can't have a bite because then that means the tree would only fruit every second year or something like that. So we decided to, keep me away from the apples, hoping we get good harvests. Well,
it all goes back to that old story with the woman in the garden there. We're a little gun shy.
Yeah.
We'll try the apple first just to make sure.
Sounds like a good excuse to meet.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just fun, right?
Yeah.
And we like tradition, and my family's full of little things like that, just like most families, and it's fun to honor those traditions sometimes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I look forward to that though, and looking for one of the things to say about the planting ahead of time for what you're going to reap later on. The one thing that we did already have the benefit of that was our asparagus. And so our asparagus, I'm looking forward to that this year too, because I'm hoping it's going to be like even more than it was last year. And last year we got a pretty good amount out of there.
It was our first year last year. It was nice.
Asparagus is one of those things where it's just like nothing compares to that taste fresh from the garden.
No.
It doesn't make it into our
Yeah.
house. Just eat it. Yeah.
But yeah, like I was really struck by that for sure. Like how much more flavor was packed into the asparagus when you get it like fresh from the garden, like
Hmm.
when it wants to be like kind of pulled. Because that's the kind of problem when you have huge stores and stuff like that. Like everything has to be harvested kind of early, depending on where it's being shipped from. It has to be, I think they use nitrogen or something like that to preserve it while they ship it, and all this other kind of stuff. Like there's all these things we have to do to the food, and then it's like you kind of kill a lot of the flavor, you kill a lot of the nutrient, right? That's why, like for us too, why we believe in being local as possible, and as local as you can get when it comes to growing your vegetables is in your own yard if you can do it.
Mhm.
So I mean that's why we try to do it, right?
Self-reliance, right? Yeah.
Just a question in regards to your commercial kitchen, just because that's always my dream to have like a kitchen, outdoor kitchen right next to the garden. It would never be in like our current property, but it's just something I think would be super cool. What are some pros and cons to it? Like, what have you seen that's worked, and is there stuff that you wish you would have done differently?
I think just flexibility in design. So we didn't imagine that when Denis first built that building, we didn't have like um, like we didn't imagine everything that it would become now. So we've renovated like a whole bunch of times. So when you're doing that design process, just to allow for flexibility of design and for changes if you need them, because they're going to change. Like once you start doing one thing, it leads to another. So yeah, and I think we did it was simple enough to begin with that we could just kind of build as we needed to
Mm-hmm.
things. Wouldn't an outdoor kitchen be awesome? Like people who have those
Yeah.
pizza ovens in their yards, like that's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I always think of like, oh, that we're in the suburbs, right? So we're limited in space, but we're doing what we can in
Yeah.
the space we've got, which is fun too.
Well, the dream is too. We planted a couple of grape bushes there last year, and the dream is to create like a kind of structure that goes over our back patio
Mm-hmm.
that we can grow the grapes on. Because back home in Portugal at her grandmother's house, they have just exactly that, like the sort of I don't know if you call it the veranda or the area in front of their house. It's all grown over with grapes, so the grapes basically provide the shade all year round. And then when the grapes are ready for harvest, also you have these fresh grapes hanging off right above your head there, and that's really cool. So I figured like that'd be cool to kind of do in our backyard because I figured it was like sort of a beauty structure that also has utility because we'll have shade from the sun, and then also because if we could grow fruit on there. But
Yeah.
we'll see. That's another big project. That's the thing, right? Too like I imagine you relate to this too, right? It's like it's all the next big project. You tell
Mm-hmm.
yourself, no, this year I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to focus on what I got. And you're like, oh well, I got to do this other thing actually, or oh well, maybe we could do that.
In our house, we're really working on trying to like get a little bit more mastery over task completion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's okay. Like it's who we are, and we're fine with it. But it's definitely busy, and there's lots of moving parts all the time. And yeah, we're also getting better at finding the quiet too, which is really nice because you want to be able to like sit in your chair and enjoy your garden and just like observe it, right? And do that part of being out standing in your field and in your yard too. And yeah, but a grape arbor sounds awesome.
I guess that would be the proper word for it, an arbor.
Yeah, like that arch kind of structure.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and then that's actually speaking of that too, that we do have to build at least one arch this year because we planted 4 kiwi bushes too, or kiwi vines, I
Vines.
guess is what you call them. And that's kind of cool. I'm looking forward to that because I didn't even know you could grow them in our climate, but apparently there's some more cold hardy varieties. And at the very least, if they don't fruit, if we get them to, if they throw the colors that they should on the leaves and stuff like that, they're really cool. They throw like pink and it mixes in with the green. So I thought that would look really cool on an archway. And hopefully
I've
it'll throw some fruit. I know her aunt in Portugal has kiwi, but I mean, of course, they're much warmer there.
But those ones, is it from Phil at Beautiful Field? Because I think he
Yeah,
gets
yeah.
their kiwis in. Yeah, they're supposed to be able to do well here. I've wanted to, but we have never tried those. But they're definitely like climate appropriate, right? So you'd hope that they.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, we got like just a little bit of everything. We want a
Yeah.
little bit of everything. It's fun. And we're kind of trying to make it like aesthetically pleasing as we do it because we kind of have our goal is to kind of try to show people that you could do it like in a small space, us being in the suburb, and we just want to encourage people to grow their own food and in whatever space they have. So we're trying to make it nice, we're trying to make it fun and
Yeah, like when you have people like who are thinking about, say, putting ornamental bushes or trees in their yard. Like for example, there's a policy in Sudbury, as far as I understand it, anyways, where you got to have a tree in your front yard in these suburbs, right? And like for most people, it's like you could have a maple tree, you could have like an ornamental sort of this kind of a tree, that tree, whatever. But it's like, why not a pear tree? Why not an apple tree? Why not something like that, right? And I can
however,
understand.
the ornamentals are good for pollination as well, right? So they
Yes,
serve their
there's that
goal as
too.
well.
There's that too. But like, if say you wanted to plant a couple more trees, now you would have the problem of wondering about like say we do get bears every now and again, so that's a more complicated problem. Say everyone's got a fruit tree in their front yard and you're inviting more bears into the neighborhood and so on and so on. It's I guess it's complicated being in a city, but we're trying to find a way to make it work in a way, right? Where you can grow food in your backyard in the suburb and make it look nice, where you're not offending the suburb sensibilities too much.
And like everybody's got to eat. And so I think if we were to grow more food generally, we'll take less pressure off of. We're going to have bear encounters in Sudbury, but bears don't come through our yard, They stay at a distance.
Yeah, and
there's big white
it depends where you're at. Like, I mean, we're not that far from the dump either, and I mean, the bears are here because there's lots of food. Like, basically, the areas where we see them at, there's an area of tree and bush in there where they can kind of get access to a bunch of backyards. They can kind of run across into the park and a couple of other areas, and then a little ways away from there, they can go to the dump. So, I mean, it's kind of like a little bit of a bear's paradise in a way. And I mean, most of the encounters I think have been pretty good because I mean they're black bears and black bears are usually more afraid of you or as afraid of you as you are them, so they try to stay away from you as long as you stay away from them.
And you're in a suburb, right? Like you're not far from your house or somebody else's
Yes.
house. Like it's.
But I mean, you can get in a situation where you end up cornered because, like for example, we were having a fire over at your dad's house. And that bear, we were all sitting at the fire, the bear ran right behind us. Like if one of us would have turned around, you could have touched it as it ran by. And the bear probably kind of like walked up or thought he had to get by. And we didn't even know. Well, no, he probably knew we were there, but had to get by and was scared. So he figured if I just kind of scoot by, they won't even notice me. And we didn't until he was already gone by.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was a whole bunch of us making a bunch of noise. So he was like, oh, I just need to get by these guys. Now, you're dealing with different bears and different species. It's a whole different thing. If you're dealing with a mama bear and her cubs, that's a whole different thing too.
Absolutely. And if you're in town as compared to in the country, it's a totally different thing too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Like back home, if you got in a situation where a bear was breaking into your garbage shed or whatever, you just shot it, and then it was done. I mean, and that was it. But it's one of those things, right, where we're all kind of a part of nature, but it's like we kind of want to be living in the same area, and so it's like we got to kind of have if you want to have the bears living further away, it's like maybe we try to plant like the odd berry bush grove as just like I don't know, like environmental project. Yeah, like somewhere further out of town, you plant like, I don't know, a bunch of haskaps, let's say, or haskaps, let's say, because they're a northern variety. They do well, basically. If you could, like, maybe if you left them alone, they'd do well enough. Plant them near a blueberry patch or something like that. Create an area where the bears are like, oh, well, I'd rather hang out here. There's less people. And then, they could have their spot. We could have our spot. Because you got to figure out a way to live together. Like, that's another thing too. Like where I'm from, there was a period of time where they got rid of the spring bear hunt because a lot of people didn't like the idea of hunting bears. Now, what ended up happening though is the bear population thrived because no one was hunting them, And then you end up having way more bear encounters. You end up having a lot more property damage and a lot of these other kind of things, right? And so they brought back the bear hunt because basically you need to manage the sort of population. It's sort of the same way where, like, if you have a bunch of deer, your wolf population increases because they've got a lot of food. And that's good because if you get an overabundance of deer, you get an overabundance of disease in the deer population. And then that will bleed into other related species, like, say, moose, where, like, a deer can pass on brain worm through their digestive tract and it doesn't bother them. But it gets near a patch of grass that, say, or a plant that a moose is eating, he gets the brain worm, and now that moose is basically like dead, right? Like, I mean, they'll live for a period of time, but it's a parasite. It eats their brain and it ruins that deer, right? So that's not good either.
Yeah,
So you need to kind of we're a predator as much as we are anything else in the population too, right? I mean, the animal population, so to speak.
so here's a related example from the orchard. We had, I think they must have come in on a shipment of like rooted cuttings that we had arrive. There were stink bugs. We hadn't really had too many stink bugs before, but some came in and the population grew, and we started noticing them coming in, and they scar the fruit, so they leave a mark. So haskap is kind of like, it could still be frozen and used in processing, but not for the fresh market kind of thing. So we just spent time. The kids were young, and so I just remember like walking around the orchard with babies in my arms. I spent the time just observing them and making notes on where we were seeing them in the orchard and the numbers that we were seeing. And so the next year, different sort of stink bugs arrived. And then the year after that, other ones, like these big predatory green ones, came in. And then these like funky wasps that we had never seen before, that were parasitic wasps that feed on stink bug larvae, are pretty. It's a theory, but there's a, like, I think it's probably true. So our strategy became, because there's nothing, we wouldn't anyway, but there's nothing regulated for use in terms of like a pesticide that you could use on haskap, and we weren't going down that route anyway. So we started thinking about it, and like everything cycles, right? So it wasn't a huge amount of damage to the fruit. So we left it as it was and just kept observing. And then our strategy now is to, in general, for like one of our pest management strategies, is to plant things that will attract the things that will eat those bugs. So we're starting to plant like tea gardens between the rows of haskap. So there's native wildflowers and perennials, and like native wildflowers and herbs between the rows to bring in more pollinators in general, and keep that sort of bug system in check and balance, right? Like the checks and the balances of the systems. Yeah.
Yeah, that's that kind of integrated pest management, and that's kind of cool too. Where like you're kind of watching it naturally unfold, right? Where the stink bugs come in because they already want to be eating the hascaps anyways, and then they start to thrive in there, and then because they're thriving, something comes along and says, "Oh, hey, did you notice there's a bunch of stink bugs over there? Oh, right on. We should go over there and have some stink bugs."
And like that was from sort of tuning in a little bit to like what Jenny Forte was doing with Northern Wildflowers at the time, and her work on like restoring like degraded land. And yeah, it's exciting. Like it's like really the scale that we have, like it's just little bits at a time, but like planting that sort of diversity of species there. And the same thing with like hedgerows, and having like healthy kind of hedgerow systems so that there's more habitat for the bugs to live in, and the balance to sort of be achieved. And the system always comes back into balance, right?
Yeah, and something I learned from talking to lots of farmers is plant more than just for you, right? You got to plant for the insects. You're gonna plant for little animals, like. So that's why one of the reasons why we overplanted this year, because you never know what could happen, or the seeds could just not do well. So you just overplant, and then if you have extra, there's always somebody who needs to eat. Even if it's not a person, there's bugs or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's got to eat.
It's not a machine system. It's an ecological system, and it'll find balance if you let it. Like if you supply it with what it needs to find its balance. It's fun.
Yep.
Yeah, well, even our more mechanistic, systematized way of thinking, that's fairly new. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and we're already starting to see where the benefits were and still are, but where also the older ways of thinking of more natural integrative systems are also we got to pay attention to as well.
Mm-hmm.
But on that kind of note, I'd like to thank you for coming and talking to us. It was a really great conversation, and I appreciate you taking the time and coming to talk to us. And if people want to get a hold of your products or they want to see what you guys are up to or that kind of a thing, how do they get a hold of you guys?
I think the best way right now is just to follow us on Facebook. I'm not that great on Instagram, but you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and it's La Belle Vie Farm. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Tara.
Thank you both so much. Have a great night.
You too.
Bye.